These colors are so vibrant. Oh, I think this one's gonna look really good. This effect is definitely one of my favorites. Have you ever tried to create vibrant colors using stain only to end up with a mess? I'm gonna share with you the products and techniques I use to create these vibrant colors so you can create some stunning pieces of your own. Adding color to your wood projects is nothing new, but to achieve these vibrant, deep colors, the product you choose will make a huge difference. Today, I'll show you how I mix and apply Keda dye, as well as showcase the techniques I use to get this fade effect. Keda dye is an environmentally safe stain powder that's made in the USA. This kit comes in 5 different colors: red, yellow, black, brown, and blue. Blending these colors will create more variations. It's recommended to use a 1/4 teaspoon of powdered dye to a 6 to 8 ounces of either warm tap water or 70% alcohol. Rubbing alcohol will evaporate faster and reduce the raising of the wood grain. Adding more powder or liquid to the mixture will lessen the dye, but adding more powder may not darken the dye. To achieve a deeper color, more coats are recommended. After the dye is completely dissolved, check the color of the dye before applying. The color of the dye does not always represent the color it will be on the wood's surface. Mixing 2 dyes together will give you a wider range of colors like greens and purples. Keda dye is the preferred dye among many DIYers and professionals because of its quality. Unlike other products, these dyes are meant to be blended together. Because of this versatility, you can create some of the most stunning effects using endless techniques. I've tried many different techniques with these dyes, and I would rate this fade effect to be a medium difficulty. To create this effect, I'll use black dyes as a base and red and yellow dyes to create my fade. It's recommended to prep your surface with 150 grit sandpaper. A higher grit sandpaper will tighten the grain and won't allow for penetration of the dye. After prepping your surface, it's recommended to soak the top of your project with warm water to raise the wood grain and then re-sand after it's dried. This will ensure for the best penetration of the dye without raising the wood grain on the final product. To apply this product, I like to cut up a shop towel into about 2-inch sections. For our first layer, I'll start by adding black dyes that'll act as a contrast and an accent color in our final project. By placing these black dyes over the entire board and then sanding them back, we'll be left with an effect that showcases our deepest grain in a dark pigment. I found that adding this base layer to all of my projects is such a simple step and makes such a huge difference. It adds a lot of contrast and a really professional look to the final project. After placing this black dye over the entire board, I'll come back with my sander and remove any dye that's on the surface. When sanding, I make sure not to press too hard or let the sander sit in one place too long. The goal is not to remove all the dye, just the dye that's on the surface, revealing the dye that's penetrated the most. After I'm done sanding, I'll use an air compressor to blow off the top and make sure we don't have any remaining dye, revealing a beautiful contrast with our deepest dark grain and our natural light wood. For our next layer, we'll start to apply our first top coat of red dye. My goal for this project is to create 3 different colors, transitioning from a yellow to a red while only using 2 colors. So I'll have to use a lot of different techniques and a lot of blending to achieve that orange. As I'm applying this red dye, I want to make sure that I don't let my furthest edge dry or sit for too long. If you let this edge sit for too long without moving it or diluting it, you may end up with a harsh, unnatural looking line in your final project. As my rag begins to dry out, I'll replace it with a fresh rag and use pure alcohol to help dilute any harsh lines and blend my colors towards the right-hand side. I've learned that when blending these colors left to right, it's best to continuously move your rag in one motion instead of rubbing back and forth. If you need to remove some dye from a certain area, you can rub back and forth, but to blend these colors together or fade a color, it's best to pull long strokes in one direction. After our first layer dried out, you can see our blacks are already showing through, and we have a really cool fade from our deep red to our light red. For our next coat, we just needed to repeat the process and continue to add more vibrance to this board. The difference between a DIY finish and a professional looking finish is the amount of time and the amount of dye that you apply. To achieve a professional looking finish, it'll take several coats and a lot of patience. As I'm applying the next coat of red, I'm making sure that things don't get too dark too fast. I don't mind a darker red on the edge, but I don't want to get too much dye in the center because I want my yellows to layer over, creating an orange. After I applied the bulk of my red dye to the left-hand side and slowly began to blend it outwards, I'll come back with dry rags and soak up any of the dye I have that's blending too close to my right-hand side. I'll then use pure alcohol to blend or soften any harsh lines that are left. After letting this coat dry out and applying another coat, I knew I needed to add a deeper pigment red to the edge to get the color that I was really looking for. So I mixed up a heavier red pigment dye and began to apply it to the left-hand side, being super cautious to not blend any of these deeper dyes too far towards the center. To achieve a deep dark red, it can take several coats and be one of the most challenging colors to achieve. But I've found that if you apply enough of those coats and take your time, you'll get the color you're looking for. Now that I have the deep reds that I'm looking for and a really cool fade towards the center, it's time to start adding our yellow. As I begin to apply this yellow dye, I want to be really cautious of the dye that's underneath. This black dye can cause the yellow to become muddy, and it's best to have a lot of fresh rags just in case that starts to happen. After I've applied a generous amount of yellow dye, I'll begin to try to blend these colors together using long strokes. As I begin to bring my yellows over my reds, you'll start to see the center turn orange. It's amazing to watch this transformation and watch these two colors lay over each other and create an entire new color. I've found that using two colors to create a third color is a much better option than trying to blend all three different colors. As I begin to get closer to the deep reds, I'll stop short and come back with my red dye and begin to work all these lines the opposite way. This process can be really tedious, but if you take your time and let each layer dry out and work in small sections and not blend all these colors together at once, it'll be well worth it. After another layer of yellow dried out, it was time to start the final process of blending these colors together. To blend these colors together and soften any of the transitions that we have left, I'm going to use warm water and a lot of fresh rags. I'll apply this warm water by using small circular patterns in each section to soften the dye and then blend the colors together using long strokes. It's important to remember to soak up any excess dye with fresh rags. As you work these small circular patterns, you'll notice that the dye will start to change colors and become a little bit muddy. When that happens, you should soak up any excess dye and work that line out. Taking the time to work in small areas can certainly be one of the most time-consuming parts of the entire project, but it's also one of the most important. You can transform a really bad dye job into a really cool fade by just using warm water and a lot of patience. After another round of blending these colors together using warm water and fresh rags, I was pretty happy with the fade that we had, but I still needed to add a clear coat before I could call this project done. I've tried many different clear coats and they all work, but for this project, I'm going to use what I have left in the shop and use an oil-based high-gloss polyurethane. Using a spray finish will help make sure we don't blend any of our lines, and using a high-gloss oil-based finish will really bring our colors back to life. Before you go, let me know in the comments below, what color combo should I do next? And don't forget, the best way to support me is to like and subscribe. We just passed our first 1,000 subscribers.